yeah, slightly different theme. You probably all know me, I'm Ben. I stand up here sometimes in top and tail. I'm going to chat the right kind of wrong. So the titles come from AI, it's kind of made it clickbaity, but so we started as when good code isn't worth it, but actually, as I wrote it, that's not really true. It's when technical perfection's not worth it, is a better fitting title. Hopefully that hasn't got anyone here under false pretenses. So a bit of context about me, what I do, because I think it's quite relevant to my perspective. So way back, 10 plus years ago, I was an agency developer. So I wrote websites. This was in the days before CMSs were like a solved problem and everyone used WordPress. Like every web agency had their own with its idiosyncrasies, and you know, there's people here nodding like they remember those days. We all wrote e-commerce systems and they all had different, yeah, that sort of stuff. I now contract freelance, been 10 plus years doing that. I typically work for a handful of clients at once. I don't do long contracts, then go do something else. Mostly they're smaller projects because I like smaller projects. I don't like working on really big stuff where I forget this bit over here. I like working on things where, I don't know, just suits me. It's what I enjoy most. And now they're primarily like more in the realms, someone spoke about this a few months ago, didn't they? Like websites versus software, I think here. They're more in the realms of what that talk would have said was software and not websites. But this is the different bit. I still do some agency support. So I do like little bits of lead deving for a few agencies. A lot of which is WordPress. Bad things live in WordPress. And then also looking after some legacy things. I have my own, not quite as crazy as that one, but Zen Framework 1 application that I look after, and a few other things. I'm really good at presenting. I know how to advance the slide. Clicking works. So what am I talking about with bad code, not good code? Not really talking about this. This is what ChatGPT wrote when I told it to write some really bad code. So if you don't like what I'm saying, you can see all the errors in there, all the weirdness in it. No, it's not so much that sort of thing. So we come here and we get people tell us all about like how to test everything and how to do nice domain-driven design or get your static analysis all in shape, that type of stuff. And it's the idea that maybe sometimes that stuff isn't the way to go and isn't worth it, and kind of that's okay in my opinion. Or maybe I'm just looking for affirmation that I'm right and you're all there thinking I'm a nutter, and we'll see at the end. So just wanted to run through a few kind of scenarios I've come across, times, places where you kind of don't do all these things we call best practice and kind of intentionally and deliberately cut some corners for one reason or another. So this is the first reason. So the people. So I've painstakingly researched all my graphics here. Sometimes the work I do does not get looked after by me. It gets given over to someone else. And to take this example, we've got this guy in the middle. He's a designer. He spends his days building WordPress websites. He loves his design system and everything nicely fits into it. And he can write some code. He can do his WordPress theme if some of you might want to argue what is and is not code, but we'll leave that there. But he has problems. His team find they can't get everything working on everyone's laptop. It doesn't quite work the same, or they can't move it between servers, or they have little bits of code that are quite buggy, that type of stuff. So, you might try and help them fix stuff. And the kind of standard, to me, maybe someone will disagree, way to do WordPress technically competently is to get Composer, Bedrock, Root, Sage, those things all together. And it kind of makes WordPress install differently. You can manage all dependencies with a Composer. It's still WordPress code inside. It's not particularly nice, but it's less bad. But what if this guy hates the CLI? That's going to be a bad move for them. So maybe, that what is kind of the technically best solution isn't good there because the guy's going to hate it. I'm going to hand that over to them. My name is rapidly going to become a swear word amongst all the devs in that company, and they're going to stop using it. They're back to square one, and the whole thing's a bit of a waste of time. Also comes up when you just sort of deliver any code to anyone, really. If it's too complicated for their skill set, If it's using languages they don't know, like if they're all front-enders, don't write it in PHP, use some JavaScript stuff. And that's, maybe slightly outside the realms of what I'm talking about here. It's not, JavaScript's not objectively better than PHP, is it? But different topic. But, think about these things. What do the people know? What don't they know? What are they going to be comfortable with? What can they look after, evolve? What can they kind of fix niggles on? And choose sensible stuff. Be good if I could remember which slide came next. Aha, short-lived code. So we've probably all done like data migrations where you've got an old system, a new system, and all the data on go live day has to move over. So you have a kind of, ideally at the start of the project, but all too often at the end of a project, you have an intense period of working on your migration code, and every few days you run it and it's got eyes all over it checking it, and you fix little bugs and get it right, and then 2 days before go live someone realizes you've got a whole section not done that they forgot to tell you about. It's got to be done on time. Battle scars. But anyway, that gets really intensely worked on for a really short period of time. And you could test the hell out of that. You could make it PHP standard level 10. You could introduce loads of crazy abstractions and stuff. But I kind of don't think you should. You should just make it work and then throw it away and not be too sad that you've wasted days and weeks of time writing a load of code to use once. There's exceptions to that. Maybe it can just borrow over all the classes from the rest of your project and use those, in which case, by all means, use the time to make those better. But not as a standalone. Also, I think it applies to prototypes, demos, proof of concepts, same sorts of arguments. You're looking to achieve something very quickly, so you want to prove that, maybe there's some uncertainty in your technical plan for your project. You want to know, can this library do this? It's not super clear from the documentation. Set a quick demo up, look at it with a client. They're cool with the fact it might break. They're literally just looking to see, can we make it work? And if it can work, you go ahead and do it all properly. It doesn't have to be something you can wave from the rooftops and shout to everyone about how good you are. Equally super simple stuff. I've got a handful of this type of thing. So it's not real code, but it's loading data out of one API, remapping it, sending it to another API, or that type of simple task. And the point here is this is so simple that say we wanted to test this, you're gonna you could mock this and mock this, but all we're really testing now in the middle is that PHP can pass variables out of one array into another array. And how does that really add much value beyond, I don't know, I would argue it doesn't add a whole lot of value, just uses your time up. Clearly, if this evolves and grows, as code tends to do, you maybe need to think about, if you introduce something a bit more complicated that is worth testing, then, break it out. It's not in a class or anything even, but, real world it would be. You put a little method into one side that you can test for, say, I don't know, statuses depend on about 3 different fields, as many combinations. You want to write some tests on that so it doesn't go wrong or get broken in the future, whatever. But don't just do the whole lot because that's what people do, is my thoughts here. Also, there's kind of plenty of middle ground here. It's not just a do or don't do it, of course. As with many things, you can kind of take it a little bit far, but yeah, just think about it. Don't just go for PHP standard level 10, as Chris was saying just now. Start on 0, make some progress, or have a simpler abstraction on a small project. Don't go making 100 class files to really accurately model everything if it's not kind of right in your scenario. A slightly different one. I've not had this particularly, but the internet assures me that scenarios exist and come up where performance is maybe hit by having what we would call nice code is sometimes also complicated. There's more files, there's more objects flowing around, it's going to use more memory. At really big scale, you're probably talking like Facebook, Twitter type scale, there is scope to make your code kind of objectively worse in terms of best practice to make it faster. So it's not really worse because its purpose is to do one job and do it really fast, but I felt like that was worth noticing. More relevant examples from me, oh, more nice clip art, and I've even, look at my transparency. I have had scenarios in the past with PHP, especially in olden times when its memory usage appeared to be frankly terrible, where long-running processes would just die and give up. So you'd have to do all sorts of funny, hacky things, horrible code just to make it work. So you'd be like, ditch your object model and just, everything comes out as arrays, that type of stuff. Similarly, using, I think it was Doctrine 1, you used to get these problems all the time where it would just end up with massive object graphs and run out of memory, and you just had to ditch it and just load all the IDs out of the database and initialize record by record and manually unset them and all sorts of, that's the closest parallel I could think of to this, which is kind of working around the inadequacies of PHP and other libraries maybe, but still kind of loosely tied. Some overlap with here. So some legacy. So Chris has just been talking about this. This is what ChatGPT thinks legacy code looks like. Server cupboard with lots of cables in. Sometimes if you're working on old stuff, Chris has just covered this really well. You can't just make everything good at once. Clearly his level 0 PHP stand is not as good as level 10, but aiming for levels 10 there, I think we can all agree is mental. You're never going to achieve it. Do something you can actually get towards, use some baselining and go from there. Similarly, again, PHP stand, I work with WordPress now and then, and on slightly bigger projects, you kind of do want to introduce some testing and QA type stuff, which, don't point PHP stand at WordPress. It's just I've tried it a few times and I've yet to actually keep it. It just doesn't add any value. It just all ends up a bit of a mess, a bit of a muddle. The WordPress code is you have methods and they don't have any type hints and they have dot blocks. It's can return a WP error object or it can return a post object, or sometimes it will be it's what's PHP style meant to do with that? And you're going to spend all your time, it's not going to be an error, or if it is an error, you catch that, but you just spend loads and loads of time writing code to account for PHP stan, and it's still WordPress underneath, which does a great job at what it does, but some of the code is just WordPress. Another interesting one, maybe a little bit contentious. If the risk or cost of failure is low, it's okay to be less good. I think if you flip this around the other way and say if the risk and cost is super high, then everyone will agree that you spend way more time. If you've got a payment flow or a checkout flow on e-commerce, everyone's nervous about that. They test it when it goes live. They QA it hard. So I think that makes it less contentious. You clearly focus your efforts where it's going to deliver the most value, right? If something can fail and it doesn't cost the business, the client any money, then why are you going to spend loads of time beyond saving your own face? Why are you going to spend loads of time putting nice code, big abstractions, all that sort of stuff if it never gets worked on and you never see the benefit? But equally, it's one of those things where if you don't do it on everything from the beginning, then maybe that's just the first stepping stone on a big rubbish legacy code base. So it's not a definite, it's just something to be conscious of, be aware of, I think. Focus your efforts where you can make the best use of them. And the last one to raise, I've left this last deliberately, is money, budgets. Because I started thinking this was the obvious one, and the more I've thought about this, the more I've decided this is just not a reason at all that you should ever cut any corners if you can possibly avoid it. You're objectively, the things I'm talking about here, you're doing a worse job and you need a reason to feel that that's okay. And it needs to be a real reason, not just we haven't got enough money to do this, so we're going to do it badly. It needs to be we can get away with this because if it breaks, it's okay. We can fix it in a week and it doesn't matter. Or, I'm doing it worse deliberately because it suits my customer to have it worse because their staff can look after it and they don't have to pay me forever. Or, one of the other things I've covered. So I just don't feel that's quite the same. I think it's probably a secondary factor to pretty much everything else that's gone, or you, in most cases, probably would spend the time and effort to do a better job. But for me, you know, just if you're going to bother and do it, just do a good job, unless you can really thoroughly. So this is me slightly backtracking and trying to make myself not look like I do rubbish work. But yeah, that's the kind of gist on that. And that is the end. That's all I've got to say. Hopefully I have not destroyed my credibility completely. The aim is to appear like I think about this stuff. I remember that what you're doing has to work for the environment it's going to live in. That's, you know, the appropriate. It's got to, the people, the company it's going to live in, maybe even the servers it's going to live on are, for whatever reason, Windows, or, you know, and that somehow constrains you. We'd all love to be able to reject all these things and go and work on other stuff, but sometimes there's reasons and you've just got to do it, or you decide you're going to do it because they're a lovely client in every other way and you just want to help them, whatever it might be. Focus on, for me, I try and think about the work I do delivering value. So if someone's spending money on this, they're paying me, they're paying, you know, whatever. Like, I try not to just burn that money by making really nice, elaborate, complicated code that's perfect, and I would show off in a, you know, computer science lecture or something that doesn't actually make any money back for the people that have paid for it. I think the technical debt concept can be extended to cover this. I'm sure familiar with the idea that kind of cutting corners, doing a bad job is going to cost you more money in the long run because you have to keep, everything's harder all the time, so that's kind of your interest, and in the end you probably end up fixing it anyway, so you repay. But I guess the way to look at this is there's scenarios where the debt you're accruing is more than worth the interest payments along the way, or is more than worth fixing later. I think the model can be extended to that. Chris is nodding like he agrees. The other thing, just to add, is tell your clients as well, don't just blindly do all this stuff. If nothing else, another developer will come in one day and be like, what's this guy done? This is rubbish. This isn't how you do it. So do just kind of tell them, primarily to make sure you don't end up looking stupid in 6 months, a year, or 2 years' time. But also, they kind of deserve to know, especially if you're cutting corners because of legacy or reasons they might wish to change, might want to change, or like if, you know, one of the agencies I work for, you just kind of make them aware there's different ways to do things, better ways to do things, and that what you've chosen for them and why. Because my experience is they will kind of push back and object and question it if they feel like they want to take more stuff on. Maybe they, you know, want you to help upskill their staff so they can do stuff slightly better, or they're open, you know, open to ideas. So yeah, definitely do that bit. And another ChatGPT image to finish, and I will take a question or two if anyone has any. If you don't, we'll probably break. No. Okay, thank you.